We'll probably see some additional people filter in, but I just want to welcome everyone to our virtual seminar series here at the CDRE. Today's speaker is Art Faulkner. He's the director of the Alabama State Emergency Management Agency. And just a little history on Art. He was appointed January 18th in 2011 by Governor Robert Bentley to serve as the director of Alabama's emergency management. Some of his background, in 1996, Director Faulkner began his tenure with the Alabama EMA as the state's 911 coordinator. In 2003, Director Faulkner had the privilege to assist in the establishment of the Alabama Department of Homeland Security after its creation by the Alabama legislature. In 2010, then Governor Robert Bentley appointed Faulkner as the director of Alabama's Department of Homeland Security. With Governor Bentley's re-election in 2014, Director Faulkner has been asked to continue his service to the state of Alabama in his role as the Director of Emergency Management Agency. So Art, welcome. Thanks for coming in. We appreciate you talking today, and we'll let you take it away.
Well, thank you, Jeff, and good afternoon, everyone. Let me thank you for taking some time in your Friday afternoon to visit with us and talk about something that I feel is very important, and that is the relationships and the partnerships between our National Weather Services, our EMAs, all the way down to the local level, and then those relationships with the meteorologists from our local media that are so important to us being able to do what we're able to do. Going to spend probably about 55 minutes, 52 minutes or so, talking about this relationship that we have, and hopefully enabling you to look at your relationships between the National Weather Service, the EMAs in your location, and even those local meteorologists, and how each one of those groups can enable us to do what all of us are interested in doing, and that's better serving the public. I will say that we'll talk a little bit about today, some generics with our National Weather Service. I want to thank John DeBlock, our warning coordination meteorologist with the National Weather Service in Birmingham, for helping me come up with some slides, taking some presentations we've done, and building those into the presentation we'll do today. We're going to focus on some general events and some general things that we do, but today, throughout the seminar, we're going to focus a lot on April the 27th, 2011, which was a very, very significant event in the state of Alabama and in the southeastern United States. That was the last largest outbreak of deadly tornadoes in this country. And so I'm going to focus on some things from that, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that we've done since that. As you can see, in Alabama, we have 4 National Weather Service offices that we deal with. Birmingham National Weather Service has the largest part of the state, and they are exclusively deal with the counties, and their warning point is exclusive to the state of Alabama. Huntsville National Weather Service, Mobile National Weather Service, and Tallahassee have areas that are outside of the state of Alabama, and then of course Tallahassee is in Tallahassee, Florida, but they do have some of the warning point here in the state of Alabama. So we work very, very closely with each one of those entities in order to help us to better prepare for situations and to be able to better respond to those. One of the things that happens with the National Weather Service and their relationship with us here in the state of Alabama at the State Emergency Management Agency and with our locals is some of the things that they do, and I'm sure that some of your local National Weather Service offices do things that are similar. But as I learned a few weeks ago, we were dealing with some snowstorms here and some ice storms here in the state of Alabama, which I understand that some of you are dealing with some of that snow today that just won't let go for the spring to come in. But we were dealing with with a threat of winter weather, and I learned that there are some different things that National Weather Service offices offer to some of these emergency management agencies and some of the other partners that they deal with, and even to the general public in some of these areas, and that we don't offer here in Alabama. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the things that we do here, and they may not specifically deal with the way some of your local National Weather Service offices handle that. One of the things that our National Weather Service offices here in Alabama does, which I think is pretty common, is that they do threat-based webinars with our local officials, with the state officials, and they do briefings. And those are not only in times of impending severe weather, but it's on a regular basis that even when there's not really very much that's expected to happen, we do have those briefings. However, when we start looking at events that could take place, the hazardous weather outlooks, and as we move from those into severe weather events, here in Alabama, we basically have 2 seasons that we have specific focus on. Those are our spring severe weather seasons, but then we have, after that, and starting in the 1st of June, we go into hurricane season. The heart of hurricane season is generally around Labor Day. We've had more large hurricane landfall events that have taken place around the Labor Day time frame, last of August, first couple of weeks of September. But then when the hurricane threat passes, we go into our winter severe weather season, and actually the month of the end of November and the 1st of December is the deadliest month or deadliest time frame for severe weather in the state of Alabama. A lot of people don't realize that. It's not really something that you think about because you do have such massive outbreaks in the spring of the year, but that is actually our deadliest time frame for storms in the state of Alabama. One of the things that the National Weather Service does is that they not only provide this threat-based webinar and briefing, but they participate in briefings on our statewide radio system, our 800 megahertz system, which is in every one of our local EMAs, in all 67 of our counties, our nationally federally recognized Indian tribe, and some of the major metropolitan areas. But it's also a radio system that is utilized by a lot of our local boards of education, our state partners, the state agencies that are a part of our emergency operations plan. And so when we start having a severe weather event potential here in Alabama, one of the things that the National Weather Service does is that they start holding briefings on the particular event, and sometimes those are once a day, and then leading up to the event, and depending on the severity of it, those can even go to 2 and 3 time of day briefings over the National Weather Service offices through the 800 megahertz radio system. So that is one thing that is sort of unique. Some of the outlying areas for our office, Weather Service offices in other states, we also provide them with those 800 megahertz radios, and they get those briefings also up in Tennessee and then down out of Tallahassee. Some of those their county warning in their warning area are also briefed from that. This slide right here shows one of the things that the National Weather Service does to help us to be able to make preparations for events. This is their a slide that they come out with, which is very similar to what you would see that's recorded by your local meteorologists, you know, to the public prior to an event taking place. But one of the things I will point out about this is that the National Weather Service tries to have a conversation and to share information with us prior to that going out and necessarily being made public, to where we're able to better brief the leadership, the governor, the decision makers, and the ones that will need to make decisions on what we need to do. This particular one is the slide. It's the brief that the National Weather Service in Birmingham provided to us prior to the severe weather coming into Alabama on April 27, 2011. And actually, this is the slide that early that morning that they came out telling us what our potential impacts were on the afternoon before. And we'll talk a little bit in detail about April 27th in just a few minutes. And we'll focus specifically on how some of the things were done leading up to that day and that day when it took place. Then the other thing that we do is that we have the National Weather Service, they provide us with very detailed forecasts. Because one of the things, especially in winter weather, and this is one of the things, the reason I use this particular slide, is because in the state of Alabama, winter weather events are the hardest event that it is to forecast. Because as you well know, for any of you that's involved in forecasting, if you forecast a rain event, and you forecast that event to that the impact of it is going to be a tenth to a half an inch of rain, and it actually turns out to be 3/4 of an inch of rain, and unless that is a flash flooding type situation, missing the forecast by a small amount on the amount of precipitation, or even the area that the precipitation is actually going to occur, most people don't really pay any attention to putting out a 40% chance of rain in a location. You know that, well, it's a pretty good chance that it may rain, and if it does, we're just going to be prepared for it. In winter weather situations, you're dealing generally with something that is much more significant in that a slight variation in the forecast area that is potentially forecast to be impacted, or the amount of accumulation or precipitation that is forecasted, and exactly what that precipitation entails can make a tremendous difference and have a huge impact on what takes place with the general public. And so I use this as an example that you see this forecast area, and so let's say that the temperature changes on the end or the outside north or south side of this by 2 to 3 degrees. It can mean the difference between just a cold rain, freezing rain, snow, and or ice. And depending on whether it is rain, snow, or ice, those types of precipitation have a huge impact on how we try to do a response or plan a response. So we work very closely with the National Weather Service to try to best forecast that we can. Now, one of the issues that we look at very closely, and this goes back down to our relationship with the local media. One of the issues that we see is that today, in today's world, you have so many different types of organizations that are forecasting the weather. You have applications that people utilize on their digital media that it's almost like that they trust that application as much as some of us trust our local meteorologist. The meteorologist that comes into our homes every afternoon, tells us what we need to plan for the following day, and what we depend on to get our weather. Well, unfortunately, we as an organization at the state level, we depend strictly on the National Weather Service. We do not employ meteorologists here at our agency. There are some state emergency management agencies that do employ their own meteorologists that work very closely with the National Weather Service. But in the state of Alabama, we 100% depend on our relationship with the National Weather Service offices to do our forecasting. So once they do the forecast, then we begin to take those forecasts and the developed multimedia impact briefings that they put together for us here in Alabama, and we utilize those to work with our state partners and those that are at the local level in order to help make decisions on the appropriate response and the preparedness for that event leading up to it, and what that is that we need to do, whether it's that we need to pre-position equipment. You know, a lot of people will say that April the 27th, 2011 was a no-notice event. Well, it wasn't. And we'll talk in just a few minutes about exactly how long we were looking at that event and how it was leading up to it. And while it may not have been on some people's radar, it was definitely on ours well before that. One of the things that you'll see here, this is some of the staff with the National Weather Service office in Calera, the Birmingham National Weather Service office, and they are participating in one of our weather webinars. And just to sort of understand, if you look at the center of this table, you see multiple devices that are there. Because this webinar not only goes out over and through a webinar similar to the way we're doing this series today, but it also goes out via the telephone, and it goes out via the 800 megahertz radio system that we have here in the state. And a lot of times those webinars are held with multiple weather service offices that could be in the impacted area. And so this is something that our National Weather Service offices have worked to help accommodate the way that things are done here in Alabama. And it really does work well for us. And I know that some of the people that have left some of our offices have taken these ideas to other states. But it's a huge part of the process. Here's another picture of the operations that go on the floor. And I will just point this out that one of the individuals that's in this picture, one of those that is over in the corner over there, as you see, there are signs over some of those staff members, but there is an individual that is specifically assigned during a severe weather event to have communications with our state and local EMAs via our 800 megahertz system, and watches and warnings and certain weather statements are issued over that radio system to our local EMAs, as well as and simultaneously being put out through their digital media and to the local media that are getting those warnings also. So that is really a huge opportunity for us to be able to interact with them, but it's also a huge opportunity for us to be able to give information back to the National Weather Service offices. One of the things that Birmingham Weather is implementing effective the 1st of April is an impact-based warning. I know this pilot project has been tried in several states or in several locations, but we will actually start that here in Alabama. And one of the things that warning that is impact-based does is it gives information to those being warned, the areas that are potentially to be affected from the warning, on what do we know about what the history of the system has been over the life cycle of previous warnings issued. So have there been radar-generated signatures on these systems? Have there actually been storm spotter verifications of the tornado being on the ground, or hail associated with the warning for a severe thunderstorm, and also being able to get that information from the general public that may be coming back through them from the local EMAs. So that's something that we'll be starting. We're looking forward to that, and hoping that will prove out to be beneficial to our counties through the National Weather Service. So let's talk a little bit about some specifics about April the 27th, 2011. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that happened leading up to that event. I've actually got some pictures of some of the damage from that. But and then when that's over, I'm going to talk a little bit about some things that we've done as a result of what happened. So April 27th, 2011, that was actually on a Wednesday. You'll see here leading up to the event that actually on April 22nd was when we held our sort of first official briefing with the National Weather Service here at the state level. You know, they were saying, look, we're looking at some potential severe weather that could impact the state the middle of the following week. We went through the weekend. On April the 25th, the National Weather Service and the National Storm Prediction Center actually started to issue the threats and the risks and their confidence level for the event. That was 2 days out. One of the things that enabled us to do is start looking at what our posture for the state of Alabama would be for that event, and what we were advising our counties that was our possible stand-up and activation of the State Emergency Operations Plan here in the state of Alabama. We were having briefings with the governor, talking about what the potentials were. This actually was about 100 days into Governor Bentley's term in office, and so it was, we actually had planned on the 26th or the 27th that we were going to do a briefing on the State Emergency Operations Plan, and so we had to do that very quickly, wrap that up, and actually instead of having a briefing on it, we actually lived it. On the 26th, we began to have those conference calls that I mentioned a few minutes ago. That was conference calls with the National Weather Service, with the governor, with our EMA partners, making decisions. The governor actually making the decisions on what would be taking place. We were looking at whether or not you know, schools should look at closing. What should they start to do? And so on the afternoon of the 26th, just to sort of lay the groundwork, was that one of the last severe weather outbreaks and catastrophic tornado outbreaks that we had in the state was in 2008. We actually had 11 of our students at Enterprise High School in the Wiregrass area of the state of Alabama, down towards the Florida Panhandle, that had been killed in that tornado outbreak. And the meteorologist in charge of the Birmingham National Weather Service said on the call on the 26th to sort of lay the groundwork, was that he was afraid that April the 27th was going to be another enterprise. And I will tell you that when he said that for any of you that have been through an event that has been, very deadly, it sort of puts you in a state of nausea. And that was what that was that day. We began to do something that afternoon, which I think is vitally important. And that is, we began to do interviews with our local media, with local meteorologists. We didn't use Skype as much back then, but we did a lot of phone interviews. We did a lot of tape interviews. We did some live interviews that afternoon. But it was in a preparation of making sure that everybody understands exactly what we have been being told. And one of the things that we found is this. In today's world, that people generally, when they hear of something that is impending or something has happened, they generally do not take the first knowledge of that and take it as fact or truth. Because in the world that we live in today, with social media, with multimedia devices that are on our side, and we're able to see very, very raw flash reports of things, people tend to generally not take that as the gospel up front. They typically need to hear it from 3 to 4 different sources. And when they hear the same message from 3 or 4 different sources, they begin to take that as factual information, and they tend to start reacting to that information. So I point that out because of this. Generally, your local meteorologist, or even your local weather person that may not even be a meteorologist, but may simply be the person that gives those citizens the weather report a couple times a day, it is imperative that the National Weather Service, your EMAs, your other first responders, and your local media are all putting out the same information. Because variances of that information or conflicting information tends to cause people to believe that it is not reliable information. So that was one of the things that we did, and it was one of the things that I think made us very successful for what we had on April the 27th. A few minutes ago, I showed you the slide of the threat and the risk and the impact. And here's what I'll tell you is so important about that. We had been briefed by the National Weather Service that there would be multiple rounds of storms coming through the state that day. The first ones were supposed to be more along the lines of severe thunderstorms with some localized small tornadoes possible in the morning time, and then there would be a short break. The temperature would actually start rising in the state, and that afternoon we would then begin to receive some superstorms, some supercell tornadoes that had the potential for being long track tornadoes. So as you see, the first County Emergency Operations Center activated a little bit before 3 a.m. due to some of those severe thunderstorms and the warnings being issued in the state of Alabama. We actually had our first reports of damage prior to sunrise. What you don't see in this slide here is that you see that the State Emergency Operations Center, the state EOC, went to a level 2 activation at 7:34. Why did we do that? The reason that we did that is because we had our first 2 fatalities of the day that actually happened a little bit after 7 that morning. in North Alabama, in Cullman County, and in Jackson County, which is just above DeKalb, which had activated first thing that morning. So we got those reports of that. The governor then went ahead and we did a full activation by 8/28. We confirmed those first fatalities in Cullman shortly before 9. The governor actually, and what you don't see on here, is that he actually authorized the activation of the Alabama National Guard about 7:30 that morning. And we began the process of him issuing a state of emergency. Even though it says there it was at 9:15, that was when it was actually signed and officially issued, but he issued it about 7 o'clock. And so we, by lunch, had multiple fatalities here in the state of Alabama. The temperature started warming up. The clouds left for a little bit. The warmer it got, it actually set up for those supercell tornadoes. One of the things that you'll see on this, and I left it in here, is that the storms began to come in on Friday afternoon. On that afternoon, and we actually had notification of the shutdown of one of our nuclear power plants. Generally, that's done over a period of days, but because the infrastructure to the nuclear power plant, the distribution lines went down, they had to shut the reactors down immediately. So while all of that was taking place, we had that event that we had to be able to go and handle also, and the days just started from there, and they began to rock on. I'm gonna move through these sort of quickly, but I want to point out as we look at this that part of the key to the National Weather Service being able to give as much advanced warning as possible was the situational awareness that we were able to provide back to them on exactly what was taking place. These pictures are actually, some of these are from the North Alabama, from up in the Cullman area. I'm going to back up. This one right here is actually some of the destruction that took place where the first fatality occurred in Cullman County that morning. And so as you see, as we started getting those strong storms, we began to assess the situation and know that we had to make some very quick decisions to get things ready for that afternoon and to be able to have the people be warned excuse me, of the impending danger, the impending danger from that afternoon. This right here is actually in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where one of the storms went across. Now here is one of the things that the National Weather Service was able to do. They actually captured this. It's on a slide, but very quickly they were able to give us sort of some situational awareness about what was coming out of Mississippi and what was about to take place. And I'll point out to you on this particular slide that they had the debris signature coming out of Mississippi, which I don't know, Jeff, if they can see my cursor on the screen, but if you'll see the state line there that runs down on the left-hand side, they actually gave the warning, and they had about 12 minutes worth of warning in the city of Hackleburg of that EF5 that was coming through. That's right, along that yellow line there is the state line, and they actually put the warning out prior to that. Now, this is what's important. Most of the school systems had turned school out because in Alabama, after the 2008 storms with the school in Enterprise, people were reluctant to leave their kids at school. So we knew that throughout the state of Alabama, we had a large amount of kids, school children, that were at best in substandard structures for probably an EF3 tornado, a large 2 to a 3. But we knew that even if they were in new structures, when we're dealing with tornadoes that look like this and are EF4, large EF4 and EF5 tornadoes, that they're not going to survive unless they're in a hardened structure that's built to the standards of FEMA 361 safe rooms or 420 safe rooms or something of that magnitude. So about 12 minutes, and this is what the results of that was. This is the school at Hackleburg, one of the classrooms there. Here you see the school buses that were out in the schoolyard that had been brought back that day. This next slide, that is the front door of the police department. Actually, and what you can't see is just through the door that you can tell there's an open door to the right there. It's a doorway. Was their dispatch for their police department and their fire department. And that was totally destroyed. I'm going to go back just a minute. So you had no fatalities right in the immediate area of this particular tornado. Now, it did produce fatalities. It was one of the deadliest that day. Actually killed 24 in the county that was just north of this one here. We originally thought it was 32, but it was actually 24 that were killed in that particular tornado. But the relationship between the National Weather Service, the EMAs, the first responders, and the local media is a perfect example of why we did not have more fatalities here in the city of Hackleburg and throughout the state. This right here is the Tuscaloosa County Emergency Management Agency and the Emergency Operations Center. The top picture, you see what it looked like before. The bottom picture is after a direct hit from the EF4 tornado that went through Tuscaloosa that afternoon. This was the first deadly tornado that hit that afternoon. A lot of people have seen the bank camera, the camera on top of one of the local bank buildings, seeing the tornado that, as they're usually in the state of Alabama rain route, you can't see it real good. But when we saw it that day, it was not rain route. And this is the side of it. You'll actually see one of the news media vehicles that is one of their satellite trucks that was sitting there. The vehicle that's directly beside that is one of my employees' vehicle, one of our state EMA vehicles that was there. So immediately they were unable to function as the emergency operations center, and they had 2 more tornadoes that hit the area after this, and so we had huge concerns that we were able to warn those first responders and to be able to warn the people in that. Here is one of the things that the National Weather Service does post-storm. They begin to give us the warnings that were issued, the areas that were hardest hit. It helps us to be able to determine where our damage assessments need to be done. Here you will see where those tornadoes hit. Marshall County, Alabama, you'll see there in the top right part of your screen, actually had and still does hold the distinction of more ESF5 tornadoes in a 24-hour period than any other place in the country. You see where those hit that day, and we had some of the lowest, fortunately, the lowest loss of lives in that area, because we were able to track those across the state, and as we were able to give good situational awareness to people, listen to the local meteorologists. They listened, and we actually were getting on TV with those local meteorologists and saying, look, here's what it's done in other parts of the state. You need to take cover. You've got to get out of the structure. You've got to get to a storm shelter, a safe room, somewhere underground, but you've got to do that. So here real quick is just the way the day ended up. There were 62 tornadoes, 70 passed, about 23,500 square miles where the tornadoes were actually on the ground. These were not radar-generated tornadoes where they were above the ground. This is where they actually were on the ground. Ended up with 254 fatalities, unfortunately, that day. But from the destruction that you've seen in some of these previous pictures, it could have been much, much worse in 19 counties. Over 23,000 homes and our apartments totally destroyed or heavily damaged, with an additional about 12,000 businesses that were destroyed from that. Huge amount of debris, and it just really changed us dramatically. So what did we get out of that to sort of wrap up and to sort of conclude? What did we learn from that? Well, there were a couple of things that we learned. Is that one, we absolutely have to have a consolidated public education and outreach. And we work very closely with the National Weather Service offices to do an all hazards awareness workbook or book that's able to be put out to the individuals. We are continuously out there at events where our partners are, where the public is. We work hand in hand with the National Weather Service and our local media to be able to go out and do programming of National Weather Service weather radios. So that is a huge thing. And we believe that there have been somewhere in the neighborhood of about 15 to 20,000 radios that have been programmed by our local media, our local meteorologists, our local EMAs, first responders, and with the National Weather Service. So that's another thing. We worked real hard, even with the funding cuts by the federal government to the local National Weather Service offices. We try to fund storm spotter classes and have storm-ready communities in as many of our counties as possible. And what we have found is that really does enable us to help build that relationship with everyone that is involved in trying to protect the public. National Weather Service participates with us in workshops and conferences. We try to hold conferences and have specific tracks and sessions for our partners with the National Weather Service, meteorologists from our local communities, to be able to get out there. And it really does help build that coalition that ultimately is able to save those lives. Then last, but certainly not least, is the exercises that are participated in. So one of the things that you'll see here is that as a result now of events that have taken place over the last 4 years, since April 27, 2011, the winter weather event in January of last year, where we had people that were stranded throughout the metro Birmingham area. Same time things were going on that way in Atlanta, had some things going on in Arkansas, just huge events, was to involve the National Weather Service in being able to have them to brief our partners that we turn to make recommendations for what we intend to do as a result of what we're seeing in the weather. So the National Weather Service is really good about creating mock situations that we're able to utilize for training and exercise, and they're also very involved in being able to give us the information they can to help us make the decisions about what the appropriate response will be. that is something that did not necessarily occur in the past, and they were not as involved in the preparedness part of it, but that has absolutely been strengthened today. So that gives you a pretty good idea of what we have done, how that relationship is able to work. It's about going out there and being a part of the preparedness efforts with our local media. The governor does a yearly event where we have Severe Weather Awareness Week, and we promote weather awareness. As a result of the April 27th, 2011 tornadoes, we now have a emergency weather or emergency supplies sales tax holiday. So for a weekend, anything that deals with emergency response or preparedness up to $100 is tax-free, and on generators up to like $600. So you can get those items. It's to help focus on putting that awareness out there, and it's done with all of our different partners and the ones that we talked with today. The other thing, and I don't really have a slide on it, but I will say that we just opened, and the University of Alabama at Huntsville, working with their university as one of the recommendations out of the Governor's Tornado Recovery Action Council. We are now looking at more historical research and data based on storms that will help us be able to protect our citizens in future storms. Jeff, with that sort of concludes the formal presentation. I'm going to back up real quick. I want to show you one thing that I just forgot to point out when I showed it, and I just saw it on here. This truck that you see in this picture right here, there actually was an individual in that truck. He was picked up about 3/4 of a mile from where this truck landed right here, and the individual survived that. I forgot to point that out, but that's why that was in there. He did not and had not been warned of the impending tornado coming into that area there, but fortunately did survive that where the truck landed. So Jeff, with that, I'm going to open it up to any questions that anyone may have.
All right, sounds good, Art. If anyone has any questions, you could either open up the box on the bottom, type it in the chat, and we'll ask Art for you, or you can raise your hand and we'll go ahead and give people an opportunity to answer some questions or ask some questions for Art to answer. We'll give you 20, 30 seconds here to think of any questions you may have, and we have another about 10 minutes or so left if anyone has questions.
Hey, Jeff, has anybody got a question?
Not as of yet. I haven't seen any hands come up yet.
One thing that I will point out was that following this outbreak, there was a lot of attention focused on sort of the alert and notification, how that alert and notification was done. Mississippi State and their meteorological, program there looked at, and some of their doctoral students looked at the data from those to see if there was a reason that the fatalities were either as high as they were or whether they were actually lower than what could have been, because of the way those warnings were issued and the relationship between those entities that you talked about today, or that you had us focus on today. And so there were a couple of interesting findings out of that, if no one has a question, I'll talk about very quickly that may be of some interest to them. So one of the things that they determined was this, that there were a number of areas that actually in an effort to do as much as advanced warning as possible, because the tracks were along some of the same paths. And I'll go back to the slide that we can look at here, where you see these numerous areas of the state where multiple tornadoes went through. So you see this area where it comes out in North Sumter County, through Pickens County, and through Tuscaloosa. You've got several ESF3 in the north end. You've got some ESF5, and what you need to remember is while those tracks, those lines are very small, some of those tracks were as much as a mile wide. But one of the things that we found were that because we were not doing polygon warning, we were issuing warnings for counties, that there were people that stayed under warnings and some schools that stayed under warnings for as long as an hour and a half to 2 hours. And there was concern that because we were not doing polygon-based warnings, that people became complacent when warnings were issued for the southern part of, and I'll use Tuscaloosa County, it's a large county, the southern part of the county, and people in the north part were not impacted by that. And so do they take those as serious? So one of the things that has happened as a result of this event is more polygon-based warnings. But let me warn this, that there seems to be a trend of more than even a polygon-based warning to more like street-specific warnings. And I was very worried that we may overreact as we do in some situations and go to the point that we started doing more location-specific warnings. And what I feared was this, is that if we did that, we were going to have more people that were not taking the warning seriously because they lived a half a mile from this street, or they weren't within a short distance of that particular location. Some of these tornadoes, especially the larger tornadoes, the ESF4 and EF5 tornadoes, what we actually saw was areas even a mile from the track where it had spawned off smaller tornadoes by the sheer intensity of the storm. So I will tell you that I think we did a pretty good job at trying to narrow the warning, alert and notification of warning area, but not let it get so specific that we actually were giving people a false sense of security that they weren't going to be hit when they may do that. So there's a question there of did the morning round of storms and severe storms complicate efforts to communicate the severity of the afternoon storms? And what I would say is the answer to that is no. What we did is we tried to warn people that it actually was not good that the sun came out and the temperatures began to rise during the day, and that they did not need to let their guard down, that the storms had come through earlier. Because as you well know, sometimes the timing of an event either slows down an hour or two or it speeds up an hour or two, and so the event moves, the system moves through. We were very specific trying to put that messaging out that people could not get complacent because the storms were still coming that afternoon. And I do think that is a very real impact on those evening storms. They could have been much deadlier had people have not taken those and heeded those warnings from that. Very good question, but yes, it was about messaging, and I think it was about the messaging from all parties involved being the same that made people understand they absolutely had to keep their guard up for the afternoon around the storm.
One more question for you that I wanted to discuss with you. When we talk about some of these storms that came through in the aftermath of this, you know, I know a lot of the research, I looked at that Tornado Action Council. Some of the things going on, how do you feel the public is in perceiving severe weather now sitting 4 years after this event? Do you think they have a more heightened sense now than they did before, or do you think that's something that is wearing off since it's been a couple of years past?
Very good question, and it is something that we look at. I think that you do still have a number of people that were in the direct path of some of these very, very severe storms that, you know, it's just changed their life forever. If you follow social media, one of the hashtags that you see that's still taking place is weather aware. They start through social media hashtagging, you know, Alabama weather aware, and they're trying to make people be aware of impending severe weather. I had a meeting this morning. So while I think that has helped, it has also created an atmosphere by which people can create panic because they they reference back to April the 27th, and they say, oh, tomorrow is going to be like April the 27th. We had this last year where we had storms that were coming into the state on April the 28th. And so we were having to try to manage that listen, you know, the weather tomorrow, while we do expect it to be severe, we do not expect it to be as severe as April 27th, 2011. So I think people still are weather aware. We're trying to educate them on polygon-based warning. But it's a matter of getting them to understand that they absolutely have to have a personal preparedness plan for dealing with severe weather or any other threat or risk for any location that they are.
All right, Art. We appreciate you coming in today. Very interesting talk. Really liked having you here today. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for talking to us. A lot of information here, very important no matter where you live. You know, obviously each state, each area has their own natural and man-made disasters that they have to worry about. And the lessons you learned and the state of Alabama learned were certainly helpful. So Art, thanks for coming in. I want to plug real quick, we'll have one more virtual seminar series. That'll be Friday, April 10th at 1 o'clock. Matt Pelak, he's the Director of Strategic Partnerships for Team Rubicon. He'll be in. So nonetheless, thanks for coming, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Art, if you don't have anything else, we'd like to thank you again from the CDRE and everyone for joining, for coming in and talking to us.
Thank you, Jeff. And if there's ever any way we can help the CDRE, we're always wanting to be involved in disaster research and development and education. So feel free to call on us. Thank you for the opportunity today, Jeff.
Thanks, Art, and everyone. This will be available on YouTube. We'll put it right on our CDRE website at millersville.edu. You can search for CDRE. We'll put the YouTube clip up likely on Monday. We'll have that out and available to live in Foreverland. All right, thanks again, Art. Thanks, everyone, for joining us.
There's a huge push with emergency management degrees around the country and Homeland Security degrees. And what I would say is this, that a requirement for a certain amount of education at some of the entry levels, it is good, but you have to allow some of those operational positions to also substitute. You have to, even if they have a degree, they've got to have a certain amount of either public safety or emergency management or some type, and we use some of the military classifications and others. They've got to have some of that experience at the state level, because people that are coming in with just an education, they find very quickly that they work well in an exercise, but in an actual response, since we can't control so much of this, that they don't do so well because they've not been out there and experienced it.
Great. I mean, I think you bring up a valid point there. We had I talked with Eric Jones a little while back for a project here, and he had been talking about the idea that you guys were looking into doing some type of statewide certification for your emergency managers, just to get everyone on the same page, since you have such a wide variety of hazards and counties and makeups of your population. So, you know, those are all valid points.
And one of the things, Jeff, that I would point out to you is that the term emergency management director is not a uniform term nationwide. It is very different from state to state. Now in Alabama, it is beginning to become an institutional and a uniform term. But I will tell you this: that for a lot of your people up in that part of the country, and especially out in the Midwest, that they don't have emergency management directors. They don't have local ones, and their state director, their state's EMA is really not very involved, and so we've learned that. So I would say that if you're looking at something to sort of research, is just look at, see, we're a cabinet level agency. It was created in '55, but we're one of a very small amount of actual cabinet level agencies across the nation. Most of your EMAs are just divisions under another agency that in some cases almost has no responsibility in response.
Yeah, a lot. I know that there's a lot, where you're just on the level of coordinating different things. I know here in Pennsylvania, since we're a Commonwealth, it falls to the lowest form of government. So you have all these tiny townships and boroughs, over I think 2,500 of them, that you have to get that for the authority having jurisdiction. So it's really tough to sometimes even go township to township or township to borough, let alone county and state levels. And with that municipality being a strong local level government, a lot of times the county to state levels become a little weaker across the area. So you do make some valid points living in Pennsylvania, living in Alabama. I know I worked with you, while I was at WSFA, and there's definitely a difference in, the way the organizations are run and how active you are. And I know that Alabama was exceptionally active, actually being able to ride around. Even Louisiana, when I was in Louisiana, they were very active. But I think the nature of having so many natural disasters and the way the laws are written really help in that fashion of having the ability to get things done at such a high level.
Well, look, Jeff, if there's ever anything y'all need, you got my number. Y'all call us, and I just appreciate the opportunity today to speak to your group.
We appreciate it, Art. Thanks for taking a couple extra minutes to talk about that. I'll be sure to pass it along to my instructor. We really appreciate having you here, and have a good one. We'll try to get through this snow, and we'll hopefully you can get us some warmer air up here.
All right, man. Take care.
Thanks, Art.